Good morning, and thank you for joining me again on this video series that I've been doing. My name is Jeff Corantier, and I'm from Arcanum Holistic Clinic. And the purpose of this video series has been around taking all the really specific scientific and philosophical truths that we build Halkins medicine out of, and really extending them out into everyday life. How to not just use them in a very formal scientific way, but really how to use them to enhance your day-to-day living. How to really make better sense of yourself and your life, and to live in kind of a greater sense of fulfillment and really unfolding yourself. I'll quickly apologize if you're hearing background noise. There's a little bit of repair work being done in the next room, but we're not going to be concerned about that. We're going to get on with our content. In today's video, we have what I'm calling a kind of a special guest. And by special guest, I mean I have a quote that I've come across from Dr. Samuel Hahnemann. So we're pretending he's here sitting next to me. In spirit he is, but of course he's not literally sitting here. It's just me. But I've been working on a book on the homeopathic remedy of Staphysagria. And in the process of working on that, I came across this quote from Dr. Hahnemann, which, as I say, will be our central focus today. And we'll be getting to that very shortly. But just to kind of, why don't we just get right into it? So we get right to Dr. Hahnemann as soon as possible. And as I said in our video series in general, this has been our running theme, is we're taking what I'm calling the method of dynamic science and showing how, as I just said a moment ago, it's not only applicable to the very formal use, the way science, as we know in Dr. Hahnemann's system, we have this whole science of dynamic medicine. We have his principles of the law of similars and the law of opposites, and he really spent his whole life developing all of that into a medical science, and we're grateful for that. We still use that today, of course. It'll still be true tomorrow and next decade and next century. But just to say that when we take this method of dynamic science, yes, we get people like Hahnemann giving us this very specific medical application, but we also have the very same method, and we've been talking about this through all this video series, and you can apply that very same method on a personal, individual level. The way we go about our life and find our way in life. A previous video, we talked about finding your calling. I forget how many weeks ago that was, but that was in this series. But that was on this same idea, that you take this method of dynamic science, and it's not, doesn't have to be all formal and within the laboratory of science, but it can be within the broader laboratory of your life, so to speak. So this is where we've been going with this whole video series, and a little more specifically, like, this will lead us into the Hahnemann quote that we're going to look at in a moment. And we have, as we've talked about in previous videos, we have the fundamental method of dynamic science has to be built on not not what we usually find in material science, which has this false premise that it puts the whole world out there as this supposed static objective reality, and then somehow we're just here, being mere observers, seeing all that world out there. But the whole method of dynamic science doesn't work that way. It's, as I say here, it works on this dynamic participatory consciousness, where there's this living dynamic interaction between, well, let's not even call them an observer, let's call them a participator, and nature as a whole. So there's this dynamic interaction. So very much the way when we read a book, a novel or just about any kind of book, it's not just that the words are just sitting out there and you're just taking them in one word at a time, but there's kind of this almost, well, like we're gonna be doing this with Hahnemann's quote in a moment. You have this living relationship with what you're reading, and your inner life and the outer ideas, they're kind of alive together. There's kind of this dynamic conversation that happens when we're reading, but I'm using this as an analogy for when we do the method of dynamic science in general. It's this living process between the scientist and the whatever it is that's being studied, whatever that's being participated. That's this basic method of dynamic science. And my second point that I have on my little note here is that this very method, this dynamic participatory method, by definition, it requires that the scientist, or as I said a moment ago, just the science of living a good life, of an individual good life, it needs a method, and that method is founded like on an individual basis, inside the individual scientists and their consciousness and what the method is. And of course, as we've talked about in previous videos, to enact that, to activate that, you need, as the scientist, or again, just the individual person, you need to have a really clear method that you've developed in yourself, and that involves overcoming any kind of inner prejudices, any kind of inner, like we kind of inherit errors and wrong ideas just from our culture and our parents and our school system and what have you. We end up with a kind of sitting on a foundation of error and falsehood. So actually, let's go straight into Hahnemann's quote on that note, because that's a good setup for what he said. So what I'll do is I'll read through his quotes top to bottom, and then we'll kind of loop back around and we'll kind of make more commentary on some of the things he said here. So again, just brace yourself to enjoy the delicious language of Hahnemann. It's always a treat, to get his very lively, poetic language. Of course, this is a translation, but it does come across well in English. And so here goes. I'll just read through, and then we'll come back to the top again. And this, by the way, this is from an essay called Contrast of the Old and the New Systems of Medicine, from his collected works called The Lesser Writings. I know full well that it requires heroic courage in order to cure ourselves of prejudices grown almost into mental infirmities, which have become sacred to us on account of their hoary age, and that it demands a very uncommon strength of mind to eradicate from our memory all the absurdities that have been imprinted upon our youthful susceptibilities as oracular deliverances, and to exchange them for new truths. But the oak garland with which a consciousness of acting right crowns us rewards these victories over ourselves 1,000-fold. Do old, antiquated untruths become anything better? Do they become truths by reason of their hoary antiquity? Is not truth eternal, though it may have been discovered only an hour ago? Does the novelty of its discovery render it an untruth? Was there ever a discovery or a truth that was not at first novel? Now I'm going to go back up to the top, and I'm just going to make some of my own comments here, now that we've heard the elegant, beautiful prose of Hahnemann. Let's weave in some of our more general thoughts here. So right at the beginning, when he says, I know full well that it requires heroic courage, this phrase, the heroic courage, actually, where I got to this, as I mentioned, I've been writing this book on the homeopathic remedy Staphysagria, and the part of the book I've been working on is taking this very famous phrase from Hahnemann. If you go to his organon and the inscription right at the beginning, and we maybe even talked about this in a previous video, again I forget if so which week that was, but when he opens with that inscription, which is aude sapere, that famous Latin phrase, which is dare to know, or have the courage to know, have the courage to face the truth. So this aude sapere, or this heroic courage, as he says here at the beginning of this quote, this idea of why do we need the courage, and the more we've talked about this before, as we get into dynamic science and its method, we're really kind of having to uncover in ourselves all of, what does he say here, the mental infirmities which have become sacred to us on account of their hoary age. So basically, we contain all these errors within us, within our consciousness, within our our cultural minds, all that we've inherited from our, the time we live in, and what we would kind of absorb from around us, we end up containing all these errors, all these distortions of truth, and we don't even realize it. So that's where, Hahnemann comes in with his aude sapere, or what he says here in this quote, the heroic courage. It takes this courage to really confront all of that. So as I said in my note earlier, that method of dynamic science has to be founded in this true method within the individual scientist, or just the individual person who is on their own path of uncovering their own truths and their own path in life and all these things. If you are trying to do so, but you haven't even fully dug in and unearthed all those errors, kind of freed yourself of all of that and come into this more kind of truthful method. So that's kind of our constant running theme with dynamic science, is that, yeah, you have to really establish that foundation on an individual basis. Every single practitioner, every individual, every scientist, if they have not developed that foundation within themselves, they're going to be running into these problems Hahnemann is talking about here. And then this nice little standalone sentence he has here in the middle, where he says, "But the oak garland with which a consciousness of acting right crowns us rewards these victories over ourselves a thousandfold." So another way we might say that is that old phrase, or that old saying, that truth is its own reward. That's kind of what he's saying here. This discovery of a truth, of a universal eternal truth, that act of discovery of truth is itself, it's as I say, it's its own reward, it's its own positive experience, because we have that moment where it's kind of like you see the sunlight breaking through the clouds one day. If it's been a rainy, kind of cloudy span of weather for a period of time, we kind of really embrace when that sun kind of breaks through again. It's like we breathe a collective sigh of relief, that sunlight has kind of been withheld with us. Well, likewise, in this whole dynamic scientific method, the we what he's saying here, that the oak garland with which a consciousness of acting right crowns us rewards these victories over ourselves a thousandfold. You have to fall in love with Hahnemann and his really rich language. Like, that's why I'm reading this multiple times. It's kind of Hahnemann's language is kind of its own reward, if you like, really rich words and really rich writing. So that's certainly what he gives us, amongst many other things. And then finally, at the end of his quote we have here, where he says, "Do the old antiquated untruths become anything better? Do they become truths by reason of their hoary antiquity? Is not truth eternal, though it may have been discovered only an hour ago?" So again, this within our whole dynamic method, kind of what I was just saying a moment ago, truth is eternal, truth is its own reward. And as he says it here, even if, right now, this very minute, we discover a particular truth, it doesn't matter that it's just happened right now, or rather than something that was discovered 1,000 years ago, or something that's been known for a long time. It's not the age of a truth. In the sense, truth is timeless, it's eternal, it's timeless. And in our human time, we live in this kind of moment to moment life, day to day, moment to moment, we're just unfolding through time. But when we come across these eternal truths, as I said a moment ago, that image of the clouds kind of parting and letting that sunlight come through, it doesn't matter that we just discovered that truth today. Its eternal nature just kind of shines its light through our whole consciousness. So again, I love Hahnemann's writings, and if I'm dwelling a little bit, that's how it has to be. When you love Hahnemann and you love truth, this is how you relate to these kinds of words. So anyways, that's kind of the main content I wanted to get through today. Reading Hahnemann's quote, but really coming back to this running theme we've had through all of these videos, is we take this method of dynamic science, we take Hahnemann's method, and also used by Goethe and Reich and Steiner. We've quoted all of those as we've gone through the video series, but this really becomes our working method just in living our best life. Even if you're not a Heilkünstler, you're not involved in dynamic medicine, but we all have to do the same thing. We have to go through our life. We have to find out, what our own inner truths are. We have to find out what these greater universal truths are. And these words of Hahnemann, and as I say, other quotes we've gone through before, and that we'll go through some other ones in the future. We're going to keep coming back around to this theme of really finding this inner illumination, which is the ultimate goal of dynamic science and everything that we've been talking about in these videos. So thank you so much for joining me today. Wherever you're watching this, just stay tuned to that channel, be it Facebook, YouTube, whatever it is, wherever it is that you're watching this. The future videos will continue to come along in that channel as well. So thank you so much, and have a good rest of your day.